So this is part 2 of my notice to the Universal Postal Union, really reminding them and also wanting to articulate how they have the grounds to crash capitalism and free the people from the financial enslavement and the technological now enslavement that they are being subjected to. We, not even they, we are being subjected to. Even the Director General is probably being subjected to it on some level. So, the patents offices and courts must be held accountable and then closed for the outrageous patents they have been allowed to be protected for commercial purposes, and they must be held liable for the harm they have done at the research and rollout stages and their use as weapons. We the people do not accept the green agenda and climate change narrative because simultaneously there is the widespread but undisclosed use of weather modification to control temperatures, rainfall, battlegrounds and events intended to lead to depopulation of resource-rich islands. We know the patent numbers, we have the whistleblowers who have given testimony, we have the Land and Soil Jurisdiction Assembly standing ready to occupy the vacated public offices. The only thing we need the UPU to do is to communicate our instructions to these corporate institutions in no uncertain terms. We are dismissing the corporate institutions and their principals, agents and shadow directors. We are determined that they will stand trial and never hold any office, assets or influence again. The UPU can explain the crucial matter of our superior jurisdiction and of our superior claim on the natural and national assets and the repercussions for their attack. The truth of our jurisdiction. Please make it known to those involved in international trade and negotiations that the Universal Postal Union holds these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that now every form of government has become destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter and abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organising its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Again, I'm grateful for the superior powers of the Universal Postal Union, which gives them the authority and obligation to communicate our instructions and indeed help us form our new parliaments on our land jurisdiction. The first step is to make sure that the banks act on the Vatican's liquidation orders instructing the banks to return the assets borrowed from 5,000 large family legacies to the fiduciary of America Unincorporated, Anna Von Reitz. Starting today, the banks should be told that they must facilitate the global family group providing prepaid credit from these funds to people exactly as the funds were indentured for. Indeed, the end of the Vatican rule is dated to 2015. Please see the attached affidavit. The UPU must separate the restricted Universal Postal Union areas so that the UPU reverts to the service of the single postal territory equally. Since your deputy, the man Marjan from the Oswald family, has set up restricted Universal Postal Unions, the Universal Postal Union has misused its own and inappropriately granted diplomatic immunity and privileges by gerrymandering, adjusting borders to create an advantage for specific parts of the single Universal Postal Union or postal territory. Where the UPU has created a competitive financial advantage and other less transparent opportunities for one group of governments, it will have inevitably excluded other nations who must manage with a reduced postal service and less official privileges too. In fact, privileged Universal Postal Union territories may well outright sabotage and exploit other parts of the single postal territory to maximise their financial prominence, as the people in those other countries are left in the dark and less able to conduct business or regulation of what is delivered. The Universal Postal Union has failed in its obligations to provide a universal postal service so men and women can do commerce. For example, when we posted multiple notices to the self-appointed International Health Authority, we received no reply. When whole nations rejected the United Nations Political Declaration, rejected the WHO's international health regulations, and rejected the World Economic Forum's financing agendas as completely unacceptable, they got no reply. Very few of us have had our post acknowledged, let alone our paperwork dealt with. Even fewer have received acknowledgement of withdrawn consent and lawful opposition to mandatory taxation or mandatory injection. We the people have not been able to manage any of these mercenary institutions themselves. Even many lawyers, still operating in the inferior but legally relevant maritime jurisdiction, have not been able to bring court proceedings against corporate agents for their fraudulent conduct. Men and women will no longer depart from their own jurisdiction and endure the kidnapping and control of our bodies, souls and our minds, or of our children's. The mea culpa will outline how the Universal Postal Union is in a position to provide remedy. That is why I'm writing to ask you, Masahiko, to issue the mea culpa, the self-blame decree. I believe the apology and very detailed disclosure of the types and extent of the criminality will reinforce the power of the Universal Postal Union in dismantling the fraudulent system. In summary, the UPU can at once A. Inform their members of this case you have received on their behalf. Commit to only delivering correctly addressed post which acknowledges the superior jurisdiction of men and women in their homes. C. Stop the facilitation of bankrupt administrations and governments when they should be abolished for incompetence as per the UPU's own constitution. You direct the International Bureau of the Universal Postal Union and the control of the Council of Administration and the Postal Operations Council to serve as an organ of execution, support, liaison, information and consultation as they have been employed to do. D. Even though bankrupt governments are usually still allowed to conduct war, violations of the laws governing war and the funding of war mean that this right must be forfeited and military, including all NATO operations, to stop. These are violations to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, the Terrorist Financing Convention 1999, the International Criminal Court Act 2001, Elements of Crimes Regulations, Genocide by Killing, the Terrorism Act 2000, the Accessories and Abettors Act 1861, Independent Reviewer of Terrorism Legislation 2012, and the United Nations' own Declaration on Principles of International Law. E. Bring all commerce back under the law of the land. Render the web of fraudulent contracts null and void, and withdraw all diplomatic immunity and rights to grant further exemptions. It is clear to us that these atrocities constitute crimes of murder, and we cannot, in honour and good conscience, equity law, consent to or be complicit in fundraising for these heinous crimes, as we currently do through paying taxes. Protracted criminal behaviour with intent to cause harm must be one of the reasons given for dismantling trade agreements and seizing the assets from all corporate entities for return to the men and women. As you, Masahiko, will know, protracted criminal behaviour and commercial activity are two ways that diplomatic status are lost anyway. Please put this claim of fact and declaration of dominion on public record for us by notifying all your members. By the will of we the people, I, Woman Francis, do hereby revoke and rescind from the beginning all oaths, vows, commitments, energetic ties, contracts, written or oral, every power of attorney that we, the men and women in our true capacity, have ever taken upon ourselves in this life or any other life that is not in alignment with our true selves here and now. I, Woman Francis, woman of peace, non-belligerent, non-combatant, declare on behalf of all people our dominion and forgive ourselves for accepting and allowing any illusions, contracts that we have agreed to is supported or bought into knowingly by deception, or that have supported the illusions of all that we have learned to this day. The intent of these written words overrule all ambiguity, for all assumptions and presumptions are void from the beginning. So how did the United Nations have tried everything to deny and even criminalise our jurisdiction? I am a UPU registered ambassador from the state Miklam, which is my family name, hijacked to perform as an asset for trade and movement as property by the United Kingdom corporate government, then for revenue for the Irish government and soon the world government. This is why I am calling on you with great haste and sincerity. I am advocating for Britain and Era, Indonesia, Africa, the Kingdom of Hawaii, the Caribbean, Malta, and indeed represent the highest jurisdiction there is, the men and women of the world. It did not pass my attention that the United Nations sought to criminalise, reduce and usurp our superior jurisdiction on the 5th of April 2024, when they pushed through a treaty making defining oneself as a biological woman or man a crime against humanity. Thankfully, I lodged the appeal in time, which was critical for the court process, and look for the annex email to the Federal Supreme Court on the 4th of April 2024. Nonetheless, as you will be aware, there is no admiralty court in the world that can claim jurisdiction over proceedings brought by a living woman. The judges did read the front of the documents that you find enclosed, the civil side, and they had to acknowledge the civil law, administrative law, patent law and criminal charges brought too, due to my great seal on the back of the pages. The criminal side, the back of the page is the criminal side. A trick of judges in the admiralty jurisdiction will avoid acknowledging a case outside their jurisdiction by turning court documents over and pretending that he or she sees only a blank page. The council postage stamps on the back prevented this, and I'm grateful to the UPU for this system to counter the fraud. In awareness of the superior jurisdiction of men and women above governments and corporations, I have invoked the power of the post office on many occasions by registering formal objections, notifications and rejections to the CEOs of the following bodies and more to cease and desist their treacherous conduct. All these cases remain without remedy until today, and often without even reply. And of course there's the annex for the food fraud, the dog and horse pound contracts, Shell pollution, AXA insurance, the Garda Ombudsman, National Planning Office, Airgrid, EDF, which is the government electricity service, bringing in nuclear and French turbines and nuclear abroad, pylons, 3 Wi-Fi, 3 mobile Wi-Fi, Amazon data centres, Abbott and Charles River Laboratory, animal cruelty, welfare, non-compliance, Department of Land, Food and Marine sale of national seaweed resource, which wasn't theirs to sell, extortion of fish and marine life, Ireland's finance minister for keeping 2 sets of books, Government and Ireland Inc., with foreign direct investment, hair coursing ban, coke anti-competition logistics, making it impossible to transport smaller scale produce as corporations buy the lorry space even that they are not using, and formal rejection of local and national planning office applications, Organic Standards Board for hypocrisy, and National Water Board for not requiring drinking water is tested for Roundup. No bans on toxins, no consideration of the readily available violations tracker website, which shows immediately that all these corporations should not be allowed to operate.